All right. So today we're going to be talking about the history of moss and lichen. We're going to be using reindeer moss today, but it's not moss, it's lichen, which I love to talk about. All right, so moss and lichens are estimated to be about 350 million years old. And what exactly did they use moss for in the Middle Ages? Well, first let's get into some science. So the scientific name for moss is brophyte, and moss reproduces via spores. And they are further broken down into categories of mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. Hornworts tend to grow in tropical areas, whereas the others are more foresty areas. Mosses don't grow very large because they can't transport water over large areas. They enjoy damp and shady areas where the sun won't dry it out. Lichen, however, is a symbiotic partnership of fungus and algae. I tried to kill this and it wouldn't die. I left it in my car for a week with no water and the windows rolled up, and it's still alive. So the algae provides food for the fungus through photosynthesis, and the algae protects the fungus from drying out and sun damage. When lichens are wet, the algae becomes visible and it can show the color, which it could be a greenish or bluish tint, but dry lichen can also be gray, yellow, red, orange, black, brown, and silver. And Finn actually found some purple lichen on one of the trails that they were hiking. Lichens can live for decades or centuries, and they also grow very slow, much like moss. Dating lichen is done by using old tombstones and buildings that it grows on. So as far as uses, moss was used to dress wounds at least since 1014. The most popular choice was sphagnum moss, also known as blood moss, because of how easily it soaked up blood, which made it a popular choice for wounds and as women's sanitary products, and they even put it in infants' diapers. It was also helpful in killing bacteria, which makes it a natural disinfectant. There was also evidence of moss being used as toilet paper. Moss was used interchangeably throughout the Middle Ages because they didn't know that there was a difference between moss and lichen. And one of the most popular and interesting forms that they would use was Eusenia, or Muscus ex cranio humano, true moss of a dead man's head, which was also referred to as skull moss, which was actually lichen. So this would have been a bearded lichen that grows a pale grayish green color, and it's commonly found in cemeteries, growing on gravestones and twigs. It was most sought after, however, when it was growing on human skulls. It was an odd form of medicine that dated back to 1493, and the nature of the skull owner's death was said to affect the potency of the medicine. It was believed that the human body was just a vessel carrying a soul, and souls moved on to the afterlife. But if a person was to die by sword or other violent means, the soul was trapped in the body. Trapped souls meant a more potent medicine, which meant that battlefields were prime. But the most favorite of doctors were people who died by hanging, because they believed that the soul was squeezed into the skull for max potency, because medieval medicine makes so much sense. Doctors also thought brain matter left over in the skull benefited the lichen, and they would take skulls and leave them in damp places in order to cultivate the lichen, and then it would be placed in apothecary windows as a sign of wealth and status. As far as how they used it, they would powderize it, and use it to promote the healing of wounds, treat whooping cough, and they used it in a very interesting weapon salve, which they applied to the weapon that inflicted the wound, not the wound. So they put it on the sword that stabbed you, not your stab wound. It did have its practical uses as well as cheap and easy fabric dyes. One of the most popular dyes was purple dye that was extracted from mollusks, and lichen was used as an under dye. Eventually, when ancient Rome kind of hunted the mollusk population, they ended up just using that lichen as a primary source of purple dye. This one we experimented with, and it was not very good with dye. I wouldn't recommend using reindeer moss as dye. It didn't really take the color, and it was kind of like a brownish coffee color almost. So most lichens and moss can produce green, brown, crimson, red, and yellow dyes. There's also some varieties that can produce almost a hot pink dye. And like today, we don't really use moss for medicinal uses. There's still a big old community for dyes with moss and lichen, but for the most part, it's mainly used for just decoration. So today, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be passing around the stuff in a circle, and I will explain why we're using the layers that we are using.
So are mosses related to molds if they're spore-borne?
No, I know their makeup's different, but I can't explain how, because I looked into that because I have a huge phobia of moss. Not moss, mold. Moss.
Well, mold is fungus, right? Moss is technically a plant?
Yeah, moss is technically a plant. So I guess in a way, lichen would be more close to molds. Lucky it's not
fungus.
So the first layer that we're going to do is we're going to do a drainage layer. And in most terrariums, you want to have a drainage layer because this will make it so the water can actually drain from the soil, which means you're not going to get moldy soil from water just sitting at the bottom of the jar. This helps more with the actual. I don't know.
Does it help dogs with drainage?
Huh?
Does it help dogs with drainage?
I'd imagine it block them up.
It leads to very expensive stuff.
You don't need no drainage.
And that's
So
really
we're
like
just going to do a little layer of drainage rocks to keep that dirt from growing mold and getting nasty.
about 2 rocks deep.
Oh, it's okay.
About a finger's worth. I mean, all of our fingers are different, but you know, each terrarium will be unique. Next layer will be the soil, which I should have opened sooner. I need a knife. Haha. Good boy. I don't want to figure it out.
Eat it. You were doing so good.
So good. All right.
There we go.
I was just going to use my hands, but if anybody doesn't want to dig in dirt, let me know. Is there anybody who doesn't want to touch dirt? We do. Hands. So you're just going to do
About a handful.
about a handful of dirt.
The more time you spend, you are
You are.
Oh no, you did it earlier.
She said
Like, oh, this is what I ate. And sometimes that is
This is the creamy.
the path to tell you.
well, it's probably because it
What do you
doesn't
mean
have
sometimes it's delicious?
Have you never eaten dirt?
What's his name?
I did when I was very small.
I kept thinking I was hearing Sigurd from
Have a
Costco.
bag of dirt so you can have a
Funny
jar
if
of
there's
dirt.
Sigurd, Simon,
I mean,
and
especially
Jack.
at Pika.
Just to confuse everyone.
So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to give lichen something to cling on to, because moss and lichen like to have something to hold on to. If you wanted to make your own, you could even use sticks, but we're going to use rocks today. And what I normally do is I just put 2. That one's a big stick of orange one, but there you go. You can put more rocks if you want, as long as everyone gets one, that's all that matters. I know there's bigger rocks. Now, the card we all came for. The reindeer moss that I tried to kill in more ways than one.
Is it zombie moss?
I mean, it might as well be, but shit, I couldn't kill this for nothing. Because I have a whole other bag of this that I haven't even opened. Because I ordered too much. But you just
Squeeze some in.
now you have a jar of moss. Yay!
Would you recommend adding any like water or anything to it?
So as far as care for this, it doesn't like to be super soaked. I'd say probably once a week watering it's fine. If it starts to get a little crispy, just throw some water on it and it'll be fine again.
Okay.
But it doesn't like a ton of water.
Okay. Should we lid this or leave it unlit?
Unlidded.
Okay.
So for lichens, they prefer a lot more airflow, whereas if it was moss, it'd be a closed jar with a lot of water. But this one likes airflow and not a ton of water.
That much because take a look at what happened yesterday. All the rain we got.
That's fine.
She was the last one to do it.
It is however you think your terrarium is. Creative liberties.
Thank you.
Hey, moss.
I do have a handout if anybody wants more information. I kind of sped run that, but here's more if
You
you
said
want.
you have a PDF, right?
I have a blog that I can
Yes,
just
we
read
do.
you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. But yes, thanks for making terrariums, guys.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Yeah. Maybe save something living on my desk now.
Instead of just under your desk.
Yeah, exactly.